Hello, today I am going to cover some tips and tricks for removing the carburetors on Homelite and Bearcat 55 outboard motors. To say the least, that bottom carburetor can be a little bit challenging. When you're in there, you probably come up with a few choice words for the engineers about how they didn't give you any room to get at especially that bottom nut. I know it took me a while to come up with these tricks that I am going to share with you. The first trick that I've got is to get the hoses off of the carburetors. I have taken a regular pair of pliers and cut a groove in them to get the spring clips off of the hose. Now you can buy the correct spring clip pliers, but most of us do-it-yourselfers do not have those in our toolbox. But we do have 4 or 5 pairs of random useless pliers that can easily be modified to get those spring clips off. The next thing I've done is taken a 1/2-inch open-end wrench and cut that to be short enough to work that bottom nut loose. I've also taken a box end wrench and sacrificed that to the tool gods by grinding it thinner and reducing its circumference. I have found that my local pawn shop has lots of random mismatched tools, and they will generally sell me those for $1 a piece. So instead of sacrificing your $40 snap-on wrench, you can go get a $1 Taiwan wrench and make some modifications to that to help get access to that bottom nut. Also, if you don't have one, I recommend getting a heat gun. This is super handy, especially for heat shrink wire connectors, but it also makes getting these hardened old fuel lines more flexible and makes them easier to remove from the barbed hose fittings. So let's get started. First thing that I'm going to do is I am going to remove the clip for the throttle. So that clip right there, that needs to come off. And so it's kind of hard to do and hold the phone, but you can just use a screwdriver and or a pair of needle nose pliers to pop that off. You can see I'm able to grab it with a pair of needle nose pliers. And get it pulled off. Like to put all of these just right there on the back so that I've got them and I don't lose them. With that off, you can remove that throttle linkage and swing it back out of the way. Next step is we're going to loosen the screw on this top connector. Pull the throttle all the way up and then tighten the screw, which will hold that out of the way from the bottom nut. There you can see how I've got that tightened, and voila, trick number 1 to make that nut just a little bit easier to get at. Next thing I'm going to do is get that spring clamp off. You see with having the slot cut in those pliers that comes off much easier. And I'm going to take the heat gun and just warm that hose up right where the barb is. And that allows me to get that hose off of that barb without damaging the hose. Give that about 20-30 seconds there, and that should be enough to make that pull off nice and easy. So from there, we're going to start working on that bottom nut down there. And so I'm going to take my little ground wrench. I'm going to slide it in. Sometimes one way works better than the other. All right, I didn't pull that up far enough out of the way. All right, I swung that up a little bit farther out of the way. Then you just tighten the screw back here to hold it up. Now we should be able to get this in there. And get some leverage on it. See, I've got just a little bit of room, so I've also ground a little bit off the bottom of that wrench. And now I can move it just a quarter of a turn, which allows me to flip the box end around backwards and get a good bite and loosen that. And flip it back and forth. And you can get at it like that. Also, if that was not doing it, you can take that little shorty that you cut, and sometimes you can get that in there. Now with the water lines in, I've still got a little bit of problem, but they do flex enough where I can get some movement out of that wrench. And between the combination of the two, it's not as bad as the first time I tried to do that with full-size tools. And then just keep working it and working it and working it. Now, if somebody before you didn't use a gasket under the carburetor, or use the wrong nuts on here, that can be a little bit more challenging to get at. When we put this back together, I just want to encourage you, make sure you've got a real gasket in there, and use jam nuts on these, because a jam nut is thinner than a standard nut and gives you the room you need to get your wrench in there. So we've got that bottom one loose a little bit. We'll go ahead and work the top one, which definitely is not nearly as hard. You'll also know that by using a jam nut, there is room to slide the nut in there, where with a thick normal nut, you're not going to have the clearance and you're going to be cussing a little bit more. Again, I just put that nut back over here so I don't lose it. This bottom nut, I've got loose enough that I can get at it with my fingers and can turn it and loosen it. I'm going to set the phone down so that I can use both hands and not drop the nut. So we got both nuts off. The carburetor slides off. Nice and easy. Top one, kind of a no-brainer. You've got the two nuts, again, with your ground box end. Those are pretty easy to get at. You want to make sure that you remove the choke cable, which has got your screw there if you're taking both carburetors out. You've also got screws on the choke throttle blade arm that you may or may not want to take off. You want to be careful not to fray that cable, but if you do, you can just get a piece of bicycle brake cable and carefully cut it to length with sharp cutters. Again, going for the top carburetor, those nuts are readily accessible. Really not much of an issue in getting those nuts loose. You may get to a point where this doesn't want to fit through there, and that's where having ground this end off comes a little handy as well. And then at some point that should get to where it's easy enough to move by hand and get off of there. You want to make sure when you're loosening this screw that you don't let it come all the way out, or you likely will lose it. So that's just another tip to think about. And again, we're going to get these nuts off. Set them here where I know they won't get lost. And voila, carburetors are off. Set those over on my workbench. Couple other things that I recommend that you do when you've got the carburetors off. I recommend that you clean up your threads with a dye. That makes getting those nuts on and off a whole lot easier. The thread pitch on those is 7/16 24, and just take a dye and just run that on the threads. Cleans them up real nice. Makes doing this the next time a whole lot easier. Especially in starting that nut and not having to really torque on that wrench a whole bunch. Just like that. The other thing I had mentioned is when you're reassembling using a jam nut instead of a regular nut. I just wanted to put those side by side. You can kind of see the jam nut is just thinner, and man, that really helps with the clearance as you are reassembling and for the next time you take that off. Jam nut can be purchased at the hardware store and is a 7/16 24 thread. My mistake on that spec, it's 5/16 24, not 7/16 24. I got that wrong. Yeah, 5/16 24 threads on those. So one final word on this as you're putting it back together. I don't have a simple answer for getting that bottom nut on. The fact that it's got very limited access, you got to start that nut by hand. I recommend putting something underneath because you will drop that nut and lose it. And so if you've got a little tray or piece of cardboard or something, you're going to drop that nut more than once. The second thing is, it is super important to have used the dye on those threads. That's just going to make starting that nut that much easier. And then finally, can't stress enough, using a jam nut, which is thinner, is going to help you get that nut on the bottom there. As they say in the manual, assembly is the reverse of disassembly. You just want to make sure that you have a good gasket. As long as there's no damage to these gaskets, they can be reused. But if you need to make a new gasket, just, fuel resistant standard gasket material, or if your carb kits have come with a gasket, or you can also get some gaskets online. These are, there's a similar Harley carburetor and the Crosley and some one-barrel carburetors out there that'll use this gasket. It's not that special of a gasket. If you've got any water leaks at this time down here, this is the best time to access the P-tube. If you need to replace that or put some pipe sealant on that to prevent a leak. I do not at any time recommend removing the front plate. Sometimes these bolts will break, and there's really nothing in there for you to service. There's no reason to take that plate off of there. And so that's that. I hope this has given you some clues and tips and tricks on getting those carburetors off more easily. Let me know in comments. Thanks.